Thank you,
Thank you,
snowboarding.
snowboarding.
Hey friends, welcome to Thank You Snowboarding, a podcast brought to you by the Snowboard Asylum. This podcast is all about snowboarding in the UK. Who created the scenes, who pioneered the scenes, who built up an industry around that, who trained the young athletes that went on to win Olympic medals, and to the point where we have the current world champion in Mia Brooks. It's an interesting story and a crazy story because obviously when snowboarding was deemed cool, a lot of outside influences came in to try and capitalize on that, which led to lots of opportunities for a fairly haphazard group of people. I don't think anyone in it would mind me calling them that, and I include myself in that as well. And it's just telling some of the stories, finding out how people got into it, finding out the funny stories, and finding out what snowboarding still means to those people who were involved and who are still involved. There's still a lot of lifers in the UK scene who have really dedicated their lives to the sport and to the culture and to making sure other people find this amazing experience and who might also make it their lives. And it's celebrating that. It's a celebration of snowboarding, but from a UK point of view. My name is Chris Cracknell. I am a snowboarder for life. Although I would say in recent years it's become very tricky with 3 kids and a career. I work as a music producer, and it's difficult to plan enough in advance to maybe budget to take 3 kids away snowboarding. It's an expensive sport, and I found myself that I have not necessarily drifted away from it through choice, but certainly it's difficult to warrant either taking a trip out with your mates and leaving your wife behind with the kids, because my wife loves snowboarding as much as I do. We did lots of seasons together. We started a business in the Alps together. And so just nipping away to do that and the expense of it certainly has made it tricky for me. And I found myself missing it more and more, and certainly missing the mountains, missing friends who still live over there. And I wanted to sort of get back into that world. Reconnect with friends whom I haven't seen or spoken to in a long time, relive some of those experiences, talk about where it is now and what people are up to, and just try and bring some hype back, get myself hyped up for it, and hopefully get you, the listener, hyped up for it as well. And we're going to do that by talking to lots of people who were involved back in the day. We are going to be talking to people who are involved right now. And we're going to travel back to some of the very first people and people that built the industry, and people who, as I said earlier, have devoted their lives to this. Is it a sport? Is it a lifestyle? Is it an art form? All these questions hopefully will be answered. And I'm hoping to get stoked to go riding myself, to make it kind of bump it up my list of priorities in life. And hopefully it will do the same for you, get you hyped on what is an amazing outdoor experience in beautiful places, hopefully with your mates or your families, and get that joy, bring that joy right back into your lives. So this first episode, I was absolutely stoked to spend some time with Ed Leigh. I saw him over the summer at a friend's birthday sort of drinks down on Hove Beach, and I just forgot how much I like spending time with this guy. Ed is a great person to hang out with. If there's anybody who's stoked on snowboarding, it's Ed, and he really has devoted his life in trying to share that with everybody else. From commentating at the Olympics, he really does bridge the world of the casual observer and the seasoned pro. He knows everything about this sport, but he manages to convey it in such a way that it doesn't make it exclusive to people that are just tuning in. Certainly my parents watch the snowboarding in the Olympics and they understand what's going on and they get it. Ed really is he is one of the glues that brings this whole scene together. And internationally as well, he also commentates for the Natural Selection, which is possibly one of the biggest profile kind of cultural snowboarding events in the world, run by Travis Rice. And he just does lots of things behind the scenes to kind of bring people together. And so I was really stoked that he had some time early one morning, or early for him and late for me because he lives in New Zealand. And we just chatted about stuff and common experiences, doing seasons in Val d'Isère. And that's where we started. I did a season in Val d'Isère a year before he turned up there. And on the season that he turned up there, I had been spending some nights living in an ambulance in a car park in Val d'Isère in December. And things weren't working out for me for that season. And this is where we kick off. So please spend an hour or so with me and Ed Leigh, and I'll see you on the other side.
I do.
In fucking December, I slept in that ambulance, and it got to the point where I was like, I think I'm going to die. Like, we were changing over gas bottles to try and do the heater and stuff. And, like, tears pissing out of our eyes because gas was in, and drinking Galliano. And it was just like, this isn't going to work. This isn't working. Like, this is the definition of this season not working. And I was scared for my life, so I sort of went home.
But that what you've just described, the idea that you'd go out on a whim with no plan to another country and just try and make it work. Like, try and fathom for a second the level of passion that you must have had. Yeah. How old were you then? 18, 19?
So I'd done my first season. I'd just turned 19. I just finished my A-levels. So going back, I was 20.
Yeah. I went out there, 18 was my first season, and I didn't have any plan.
What drew you to it?
Skateboarding. I'd skateboarded, and then, do you remember High Five? Like, seeing action sports on TV was just totally, like, if you saw it, you tried to get any video. If you had a cassette in the video player, it was like dive at the thing and just press. Like, even if it was a Wrigley's ad for chewing gum, you're like, action sports. It's not a mag, it's actually on TV. And High Five had one of the first Nitro videos on it. So Damien Sanders, can't remember who else was in it. Ken Ackenbach, and it was all hard boots. But my dad had dragged us to the dry ski slope in Gloucester. Eddie the Eagle was there, so there was a bit of momentum around that. And we'd been skiing at the dry ski slope, and then I saw this clip and was like, you can skate on snow. And then started running through stuff. We came from a sailing family, and my parents used to take us to the gravel pit to go and sail dinghies. But I'd got into windsurfing as an offshoot of that. And like Grand Prix, I don't know if you remember them, Grand Prix had the same adverts in windsurf mags that they had in snowboard mags, and they were handwritten.
Hand-drawn. Yeah.
So it was all the deals and all the prices of all the gear. And like, I was doing a paper round and trying to buy windsurf kit, the ultimate rich white boy sport. Like, I managed to buy, unbelievably, I saved 270 quid off my paper round when I was 13 and bought a full windsurf setup. And I did that through that. And then in the bottom of those windsurf ads, there were snowboards starting to appear in winter, and then more snowboard kit would fill it up. And then Snowboard UK and White Line started. So there was this groundswell movement where it started to become more accessible. But that first generation, like, you know it, they were making boards. Apocalypse Snow, like they were trying to make it up. But there was more production stuff coming through by the early 90s. And then 93, my mum was a teacher, and we were able to get snow holidays off the back of the school trips. And we went out to Montgenèvre and Clavier in the Milky Way system. And me and my brother found some boards, and we were wearing these C&A moon boots. And my board had high backs and his didn't. So
oh my God.
I was starting to link turns, and he'd just fall over flat on his back every one. He couldn't work it out. But I remember I did a suitcase method off a little side hit.
Yeah.
And it was the raddest thing I'd ever done. Like, I really struggled with a fly-off ramp on a skateboard, and here I was doing methods, like second day on snow was just like, it was totally new. And I think, like, we're coming back to that passion that drove you to go and chase something unknown in a foreign country. Like, I grew up in Gloucester. I'd say there was no skate scene. Danny Wainwright was coming out of Stroud, just south of Gloucester. So I'd see a little bit, but it was really apparent to me at an early age, life was happening somewhere else and I was going to go and chase it. So by 16, 17, I was off windsurfing in the summers, and you could earn money doing that, instructing. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to put the same pieces together for the winter, and headed off to Val d'Isère.
Did you have any kind of idea of what that looked like when you set off? Like what Val d'Isère meant and what... did you know anyone there, or is it you just turn up and like, right, let's sort this out then?
No, in the summer, I'd met a couple of girls who were older. The first girl I met, Claire Whitehead, is actually now married to my brother.
No way.
Yeah, really, this is a good story, actually. We tried to make out once, and it was really odd. Kind of kissed, and it was like, ugh, that feels... We both kind of looked at each other, we were like, that feels really odd. And it's like, lo and behold, she marries my brother. I'm so glad it didn't go any further. That'd be so weird.
Yeah.
But she was doing summer season, and she said, like, it's epic, you should come out. And it was already on my radar, but I knew they were Crystal Chalet girls. So I went and stayed with them, and I was sleeping on the tiled floor, similar to your van story, sleeping on this freezing cold tiled floor for Christmas, New Year, with a bag of wine for a pillow and a couple of... we used to call them junkie blankets, those horrible, itchy things, kind of wrapped in one of those.
I know exactly what you mean.
And then it got into January, and the head of Crystal Val d'Isère was like, nah, this ain't happening. Like, you're not staying here for the season. This is ridiculous. So I pulled a couple of those, you know, in France, how they always do they put the phone number on the bottom of the advert and you tear it off.
And you pull it off. Yeah.
So I took one of those little things, pre-mobile phones, and rang this number, and this guy's like, what, you want to stay? And my French was terrible, his English was awful. Went and saw him. It was the only room available in town. It was the far end of Leigh, so I trudged down there.
Oh, man.
And this guy's there. And he put on a good show the first time, but it became apparent really quickly that he was a junkie and that he was supplying Val d'Isère with... I don't even know. I don't think it was crack. I think it was heroin. But it was awful. I'd walk back there. I'd try and stay out of this house as long as I could. He was a tattooist. And he'd be high, tattooing people. There was one, and it was supposed to be a tiger jumping through some bamboo. And it looked like a Teletubby falling through one of those plastic door sheets. It was so bad. And he desperately wanted to practice. So whenever I was there, he was like, hey, tattoo you? And I was like, no, like, please no. Run out the door. I'd stay at Dick's until as late as I could. And then I'd get back there. Him and his mates would be getting cooked when I'd get back at 2 a.m. So I'd knock on the door, and he'd never give me a key. He'd be like, my grandma is staying in your bed. You have to go somewhere else. So I'd sleep in the corridor. It was horrendous. 2 weeks after this, the police come, the gendarmes, it's pretty obvious what he's doing. The gendarmes come down and clean him out, and he rats out everyone in town that he's been buying off and selling to, except me, because I haven't touched any of his stuff. But the police had him under surveillance. Like, bearing in mind, I think I was just 19. Police had been surveilling him, and there's photos of me going in and out of the apartment at like 2 in the morning. God. So I got chained to a radiator and questioned for 2 days and for some reason, like, still to this day, I'm like super pumped on snowboarding. I'm still having the time of my life, but
you should have PTSD.
It was insane. He got beaten up, but we'd built a really strong crew of mates, and there were 5 people living in a 26 square metre apartment, like studio. Yeah. So there was no room for me there, but they were supporting me and helping me, and we all got picked up. I mean, and I'm not going to pretend that I was a model citizen, but I definitely wasn't dealing heroin. So the police didn't have anything on me, but they didn't. Like, it was still that. It's difficult to describe, isn't it? How anti-snowboarders resorts were at that stage.
Yeah, totally.
Like,
it was. I mean, that was
hated us. Like, hated us.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was how other snowboarders were like instantly your friends. Like, that's how I got a job, because a guy called Al that worked for Ski Val had an SS20 t-shirt on. And I was like, I bought my board there. And he ended up being like the conduit through which we stayed for the whole season, because he knew everybody. And then when somebody said, oh, we need a couple of guys to do this, it was just like, yeah, Chris and Matt, go on. Yeah. Off you go. And we were sorted, you know, like we were going to have to go home the week later because we'd run out of money. And then all of a sudden it just, everything shifted, and we were there for the season with season passes. And it was like, you know, you can live in the cellar of this chalet. I was like, I don't give a shit.
Yeah.
I just want to be here. I want to go snowboarding, and I want to go out at night. And that's all I want to do for 6 months.
It's pretty intoxicating when you put it like that. And that's exactly what it was. Like, zero responsibility, just put some food in your mouth every day. It's a bit like those reality survival shows you see on TV now, except it's how much alcohol can you consume and still snowboard the next day.
Yeah, when I remember after I got back from my first season, I was in sort of the local town near me, and there was somebody doing one of those like surveys in the street. And she was like, yeah, can I ask you about, you know, like I'm doing a survey on behalf of like some alcoholic brand or whatever. Which of these drinks have you had in the last month? And I was just like, yep. She's like, how many units are you consuming in a week? It's just like, yeah, you don't even, there's no way of counting that. It was just insane. I had such a weird, like, you know, kind of that end of the season, especially in somewhere like Val that is a complete bubble. Coming out of that was horrific.
I had 4 years where I'd go to Greece as a windsurf instructor from mid-April to, like, I could deliver some boats around the Med for them. I could usually string it out till about end of October. Then I'd go and work for Chris Hart in Noah's Ark in Stroud.
Oh, yeah.
Do Tam Tuesdays until mid-December, and then I'd leave for the mountains. But we had a doctor came out it was Sunsail, the company that I was working for in the summers. And there was a doctor came out. And, I mean, I worry about this now. I'm probably not going to make old bones. At the end of the week, he came up to a group of us, and he was like, I've been watching you all week and looking at your alcohol consumption, and I think conservatively you're all consuming over 120 units a week. I was like, well, this is just what we do, and we do it. Like, you'd have a little bit of time off when you were saving again, but the problem was I think in the mountains, unless you knew someone at Dick's or Bananas or the Hard Rock Cafe or Playback, you probably couldn't actually drink that much. It was so expensive.
No, it was so expensive. You just get tanked up before you went out and then stay out as long as it lasted.
Yeah, we had subsidised...
That was our method anyway.
We had a subsidised bar tab in Sunsail, which was the problem there. But I used to run a quiz night in GJ's, one of the bars.
Oh, yeah.
And like the prize was a bottle of vodka. And there was a gang of Kiwis came out in 96. And they'd preload so heavily. I used to try and get them the vodka. Like, I'd try and load the whole quiz for the Kiwis to win. But they'd have preloaded with bags of red wine before they turned up so badly that no matter how badly I rigged it in their favour, they couldn't physically communicate, like, write or stand up to win the quiz. It became a running joke, like, okay, how basic and how Kiwi can I make this quiz and you still lose?
So you did like 4 seasons in Val? When did sort of things start changing for you so that it sort of became actually like, hang on a minute, I'm quite handy at this, or I want to do more with this?
Really, this is really embarrassing. So in exactly that survival mechanism of I want to do this, I'd worked out that I was working at Noah's Ark, riding at Tamworth. I could do a backflip at Tamworth, but I knew deep down that I was pretty mediocre, because that was when you turned up at Tamworth on a Tuesday and the whole of British snowboarding had travelled from every corner of the country to go and meet there. And you'd have Danny Wheeler, Russ Ward, Stu Brass, Steve Bailey, Chris Moran, like Duncan Carr, Joe Rackley, and everyone would be there, like baby Tim Woolwards and Gendals. And I had a shifty late backside 180 and I had a backflip that I could get away with on there. But I knew where I was at, but there was more money than there were riders in the UK at that stage, seemingly. And Chris Hart sponsored me, so I had Noah's Ark patches and I got discount Burton gear for my first season. And I turned up out in Val and obviously was total shit compared to the 7 or 8 other people who were there and riding and had been riding regularly. So I had this awful, I can tell Chris Hart this now, but I unstitched the patches off my gear. I was like, I cannot even look like I'm sponsored here. I was so embarrassed that I'd got sponsored. But I worked hard at it, and I don't know, like all of us, I was okay, but I definitely wasn't. I'm probably better now than I ever was as a kid. I was a lunatic when I was a kid, but it would have looked I've got a video somewhere. I looked disgusting. Arms everywhere.
You don't need to look back at that.
Oh God. But I'll send you one clip so you can chop it out for this. It's great. The music alone is worth it. It's so awful. But it was kind of finding your way, and there was so much opportunity. I think that was the thing. And if you commit to something, that was it. I remember when I started working at White Lines, I got to a certain level and I injured my knee, broke my knee, classic ACL. But I'd been travelling a bit. My dream had been to go to Alaska and enter the King of the Hill.
Oh, that's right. You went to go and do that, didn't you?
Yeah, and I was so proud of that. And I look back at it and I think somewhere subconsciously I let myself get hurt, because I knew I'd kind of risen as far as I was going to go and I needed to find something else within snowboarding to do. And I think if I'd have gone and done the physio, my leg would have been fine. I know that now, but I didn't understand physio at the time. I just thought my leg hurt and that surgery was going to fix it. So I was quite fatalistic about that, but it led to White Lines. But it's that, I think if you've got a passion, no matter what it is, you'll make it work. And when I was at White Lines, we got so many letters and I spoke to so many people who felt quite aggrieved that it was a closed shop and that there was this kind of these people who kept an arm around snowboarding, and it wasn't the case, and it never has been in any of those sports. Those people just didn't go out and make those sacrifices, or maybe socially they didn't bond with people as well. But if you made friends easily and if you were out there, it happened for everyone that I met. Whether they were good or bad at snowboarding, it wasn't an exclusive club. It was, are you willing to make the sacrifices? Like basically have no money, sleep somewhere disgusting just so you can do this every day.
Yeah, 100%. That would definitely mirror my sort of experience of it.
Yeah, and if you made those sacrifices, then you were part of it, and that was the only barrier as far as I was concerned, and that's what I'd explain later. I was like, just go and do it. If you go and do it, you'll meet everyone, and it will be there. Yeah. I think if in defence, and this goes for anyone of any ability, I think the only exclusive thing that happens is when you know that the best group most of the time is, if there's good powder, is 3 to 6 people. If there's good snow, you only want 3 to 6 people. Otherwise it all just, any less and you can maybe be a little bit exposed, any more and it just becomes a zoo. Unless it's spring laps on a big lift and there's 40 of you. But yeah, I think that maybe could be, you could accuse people of getting exclusive when you're trying to build riding groups and you're sort of trying to dodge people. But
that's just more kind of, I mean, that does come down to sort of experience and ability, because if you're putting yourself out there, you want people around you that understand what you're trying to do, and you understand what they're trying to do, and you've all got each other's backs.
Yeah. And you go, when it comes to building that kicker, you're all on the same page. One of my favourite stories about kicker building, have you ever heard this one? When two of the, like, for me, the two people who went biggest, Gumby and John O'Verity, built a kicker together. And Jono's got fucking balls of steel. Like that, like he literally prides himself. Whatever he lacks in style, he's like, I will just go bigger than you. But Gumby was the, like you were there at that British Champs when Gumby cleared the whole jump and landed flat on the piece. You can go and read about that anywhere. But so those two got together and Jono said they looked at this roll and Jono was looking at it and he was like, okay, it's about solid 18, 20 metres to the knuckle there. And we'll go. And then Gumby's like, yeah, so we're going to, and they thought they were talking about the same landing. And Jono was like, yeah, we'll build the kicker up to about here, head height. And Gumby was like, no, we're going to build it. And Gumby pointed like double head height. And Gumby was looking at the landing after it. Jono was like, oh, shit. So with Dan Milner, they build this Leviathan kicker. Gumby goes first, as he always wanted the first landing, does this rodeo frontside 7 and like bomb holes it. And Jono's like, okay, my turn. So Jono went in, got the biggest sequence he ever got. He did a switch backside 5. And he said he did this switch back 5. He'd never been in the air so long. He stomps it, said he had enough time to stomp it and then ride and settle himself. He'd got control and then he hit Gumby's bomb hole and tomahawked. And he realised at that point, he was like, okay, I'm not going to go bigger than this guy.
No, Gumby's a fucking menace, wasn't he?
But he was a classic example of if you don't break, like he's a good snowboarder, but he wasn't he wasn't like Terrier naturally talented. And he just put the 10,000 hours in and became and because he didn't break, I saw him take the most horrific slams, but nothing seemed to break. So he got away with it and he got good.
So where sort of did snowboarding go for you? I mean, you went over to Maribel with all the... Did you go to Maribel with the White Lines lot?
Yeah, that was a lost season for me. That was when, like, it's like, you know, the Black Sabbath quote where they said we started out as a music band dabbling in drugs and became a drug band dabbling in music. Like, I was a snowboarder dabbling in partying in Val d'Isère.
Yeah.
By the time I got to Maribel, I was a partier dabbling in snowboarding. I'd broken my knee, was kind of coming back from it. And I was starting to immerse myself in White Lines. And then the reality came crashing in. I lost a really good friend in an avalanche. And it was the first time. And that really changed my perspective in terms of, I know I love this. And it had been that ignorant bliss in the background. You knew about avalanches. You knew it was dangerous, but I'd never seen it firsthand. And that season, in quick succession, it was Dilly, Catherine Ovington.
Of course, yeah.
And then straight after that, Martin Addison. Like two in one season. And he was end of the season in, was it Dubai or Countertal, I think? One of those. But yeah, it's like, oh God. And that really woke me up. But at the same time, what was a strong community really galvanised at that point. And I was in Maribel rehabbing my knee. And I remember what had been good friends through Val d'Isère, through Maribel, it started to link all of those, that experience started to link everyone. We became a lot closer in the trauma of that. And I'd say what was my life before that anyway became something much, much stronger after that. And then I started, that was 98, 99, and I'd started at White Lines. And then with White Lines, with Matt, Chris, Nick, like yourself, like everyone who contributed to that, it became a much broader, bigger community. And it's given me my career. It's given me almost all of my best friends. It's given me my wife. It's what we do as a family to stay together. It literally is the glue for my entire life. I don't know where I'd be without it.
That's quite a nice thing to know.
But I think that, like, certainly for a lot of people of that generation, it happened. But the hard part that I see, and I feel insanely privileged to have had this. My work has let me stay in it, but I'm not in any way blinkered to the fact that when you have young kids, the cost of staying in it, if you sacrificed all of those years that we probably should have been at university, you're probably struggling then to generate the income to then take your kids away. And I've watched a lot of friends who are super passionate about it. I think also it's the time thing. It's a really hard thing to get on board with, but we kept making some sacrifices in terms of, like, I say we, maybe it was more the kids, but we've actually done seasons with the kids, and it was brilliant for Sian and I, my wife, but really hard on the kids.
Yeah. How do you sort of, I mean, obviously you can put an element of that down to, you know, it's kind of your work revolves around a certain aspect of it. So that gives you sort of that reason.
Do you know what I think the key, my work does, but the key reason, probably the biggest thing, is that Sian, my wife, is as much, if not more, of a frother on snowboarding than I am.
Right.
So as a pair, like, I think a lot of people, and I remember watching this vividly in our late 20s, early 30s, where people would get girlfriends or boyfriends and the partner bought in to the glamorousness of it. But those sacrifices we talked about earlier, like the idea that most of the time you didn't have your own room, in fact, you were probably sharing with 3 or 4 people. Like, it didn't, what looked great in a magazine in summer when they hooked up, when they went out and did the season and it was filthy, dirty, and all there was snowboarding, a lot of people, if there was that push me, pull you of, well, that's kind of rad and I want to do it for 3 months, but I'm not going to do it on, like, this is an ongoing thing. And a lot of people got pulled out of snowboarding that way and then kind of settled down, or the relationships exploded spectacularly. And people survived doing it. But yeah, I think I'm not at all blinkered to the fact that Sian's shared passion with this. The fact that she was working recruitment in London and recruited herself to Geneva just so she could keep riding. It's like, okay, I've got to have a fairly serious job, but she saw a job come up in Geneva and was like, I'm going. And she'd go, when we met, she'd take herself off on the train and go and ride Engadine or go and ride Chamonix or go and ride Verbier, wherever it was, on the train on her own at the weekend. So meeting her and having that was a dynamite recipe for me to be able to stay, like, just whatever it took, stay in snowboarding.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I had a fairly similar experience. Lucy she really got into it. She was going to go to Mexico for 6 months when we met, and I was like, well, I'm going to go and do a season. There's space if you want to come. And and she was like, okay, well, let's go and do that. You know, she'd never seen the mountains before and just sort of turned up, and then all of a sudden she was like, holy shit, this is all right, isn't it? And then then we ended up having a business that, she was all in on the business and everything like that. And I sort of feel lucky that we had that, and we're getting to the point now where she's like, I want to go snowboarding. That's what I want to do. And I'm like, let's go let's make that happen then, because we both want it. There's no push and pull between, I want to go on a hot summer holiday or anything like that. It's like, we want to go to the mountains.
Well, that's no coincidence. Like, the world we live in now, what we've just discussed for so long is this simpler time of your 20s where don't have any responsibilities. You don't have to, you could make all those sacrifices. There was literally no thought beyond a week. Maybe a couple of days if you're really skint. But it feels like the world is a much busier, more kind of confused and divisive place. And the mountains offer, for me, real respite from that. Like, it's a quiet place where you can go and escape. And I say that to anyone. Like, yeah, you can go and sit on a beach, but name me anything that you can go and do. Name me another activity or even a holiday where you can go with all your mates, or you could go with your mum and dad, or you could go with your kids as well. Like, I regularly see 3 generations, and it's not like they go and do that thing for an hour. It's not like you go bowling for a bit and then you go back to the hotel bar and sit on the beach or in the pool. You're out burning around, laughing at each other, exploring, pushing each other for 6-7 hours a day in this insane environment. And it doesn't matter how good you are. It's that environment and that social aspect is so difficult to find anywhere else.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's the same for me. Partly it is to do with, like, look at the mountains, look at what's around you. Do you know what I mean? Like, growing up in Crayford, like southeast London, and seeing the mountains for the first time, I nearly shit myself. I was just like so happy.
Well, it's
couldn't believe that this boy was in that world. Do you know what I mean? It was like, wow, fucking hell.
Anyone can do it. It's why Dan, do you know the snow camp crew?
Yeah.
Yeah, so Dan, who runs Snow Camp, is taking vulnerable kids out to the mountains on these scholarship programs. And the whole idea, like, it's literal. It's broadening your horizons, showing you that world exists. And I think that's the power of it. No matter who you are, where you come from, what you do, go out there and you can find real escape, I think. That's I'd say that to anyone of any age from anywhere. Like, that's the joy of the mountains for me.
100%. So there's a few sort of more random questions. I want to know kind of what is the sort of maddest situation snowboarding has put you in?
Oof. I think, like, going to Alaska when I was 21 was an eye-opener. I went for the King of the Hill, what was at the time the closest thing to the Freeride World Tour or Verbier Extreme. That was a long way out of my comfort zone, and I met some insane people. But the BBC, when I first started at the BBC, they didn't really know what to do with me. They got Ski Sunday and it was covering racing, but there were no snowboard events with the production value on the events, like the broadcast, to put on TV. I was learning about that as I went. I was like, yeah, we could do the Roxy Jam. And you go and there were like 3 cameras there and they're like, we can't put this on TV. So I started in the off season. Sean and I were married. We were living in New Zealand and I was did some stuff on Snowpark, and I did, you can go skateboarding, snowboarding and surfing in a day. And I think I made these for like 400 quid. Like, paid a cameraman, hotel rooms, and they were just like, I think they couldn't believe it. Well, this isn't bad quality TV. They know what they're doing and it's interesting. It's kind of guerrilla stuff. So I did those 2, and then they said, this is brilliant. What else do you want to do? So I couldn't believe it. I sat there and just made a list of everything that we couldn't do when we were at White Line. So I was like, I want to go to Iran. I want to go to Morocco. I want to go to Russia. I want to go to... And just wrote this list. And they were like, hit it. What can you do? So started learning to produce off the back of that. Like, okay, how do I actually go to Russia? So got some... And the Moscow one was the mad one. Matt Barr had actually come up with the kernel of the idea and I stole it. And I apologise to him profusely for this. But it was... I actually think he would have struggled, knowing what I went through now. I only got in and set this up by using the BBC correspondent in Moscow.
Right.
And it was Putin at the time, this is 2007, Putin had given mine permits out to oligarchs in Siberia because it's Putin actually, the reason he built the Sochi Olympics is because he loved winter sport. He was a cross-country skier. So he was giving out mine permits if you built a ski resort. So there were chairlifts popping up all the way through Siberia. And we started looking at, okay, we can make this happen. We could go Siberian Express from Moscow into Siberia and then go snowboarding there. And the BBC correspondent sorted out a load of stuff for us, got all of these permits, and lent us his boyfriend as our fixer. And his name was Val. And this is 2007 in Russia, where the official line on any kind of LGBTQ plus culture was, it doesn't exist. There are no gay people in Russia. So we've got this amazingly camp fixer called Val. I'm like, we get there and he's awesome. He's the funniest kid. And I'm like, but we any roadblock we come to, I'm like, Val, can we film around here? He's like, yeah, no. It's like, is that yes or no? And like anywhere we go, it's like, can we change the train tickets for tomorrow? Yeah, no, sorry. So we have this completely ineffectual period in Moscow where we're like trying to get stuff done. I'm like, shit, this is really hard. I was, at the time, well, it still is to a degree. Anytime I'm in those situations where I need to get stuff done, my smile's my first line of attack. I'd try and disarm people and charm them, give them the 1,000-watt smile. And after a day or two, Val's like, why you smile so much? And I was like, oh, it's how I make friends with people and get stuff done. It's kind of my way. He's like, no. So what do you mean? He's like, only 2 types of people smile in Russia. And I was like, oh yeah. He goes, rich person and idiot. And a rich person does not walk on the street. I was like, so you're telling me I'm the village idiot? And he was like, yeah. So I start practicing this 1,000-yard Russian stare, trying to get the hang of it. But we ended up taking the Siberian Express, me, a producer, and this cameraman who I've worked with for 20 years now, amazing guy, Zoid. And Zoid was as green as I was to this kind of travel, but we knew we needed externals of the train. We're spending 8-9 hours a day, 8-9 hours in a row on the train. Then you get off, you got 25 minutes while the train stops, everyone gets on and off, all the business is done. So we're trying to get externals of the train. Unbeknown to us, it's local election week across all of Russia. And they're super sensitive about cameras anywhere. Every time we stop and Zoid gets this camera out, big broadcast camera, and there were little digital ones at the time that we could have used and we would have looked like tourists. Instead, we got this giant broadcast camera. The first time he did it, this Russian soldier comes up behind him, slips his fingers down the scruff of his neck, yanks his neck backwards and puts his Kalashnikov in the small of his back. So he's like bent over, kind of half scorpioned on tiptoes and just getting walked down the platform by a Kalashnikov. I saw this and was like, fucking hell. Sprint back to the train. We're on top of a gantry over the tracks. I'm just sprinting back. The producer's, he was useless, the producer. We sprint back. I just start unloading bags off the train. I'm like, holy fuck, we can't lose everything. This train's going to leave. And the cameraman's in, wherever he is. This tiny little woman, about 5 foot high, a babushka, who's been looking after us and serving us food, is like, yelling in Russian. I'm like, point over at the cameraman getting frog marched down the platform with the gun in his back. She's like, "Niet!" Jumps off the train, starts fucking waddling up the platform. I've got the passports and the snowboards off at this stage. The producer's waltzed back. He's like, what's going on? I'm like, Zoe's been fucking arrested. We got to get off the train. And Zoid, meanwhile, has been taken into the train station building. They've ripped his camera off him, got the tapes out. They're just spooling the tape out of the camera. And he's been locked in a standing cell. He said there was a gap where his eyes were, but he's he can't move. It's like he's been put in a locker, but with an eye gap so they can see him. He can just about move his head, but he can't move his body. The babushka runs in, just starts screaming at these soldiers. And he said it went on for about 8 minutes, this rampage, just tirade at them until they started buckling. And he saw the body language start going. This tiny little old lady yelling at them. Eventually, he gets out, explains a little bit. He's like, BBC, snowboarding. They come out and look at the bags. And somehow this old lady gets us back on the train before... The trains just start. There's no stopping a 4-mile Siberian Express train. It's just going. So we get everything back on. It was insane. And it got madder and madder from there. the level of there were hardly anyone on the train. Everyone was shit-faced all day on vodka and beer. We arrived, we got booked into private accommodation by the under-19 freestyle wrestling champion, who was at the time the only person I could find on like a Reddit feed who knew anything about Siberian snowboarding. He booked us in private accommodation. We got yanked out of there by another set of guards and sat in front of the mayor. And this tiny little mayor in, what's it called? Sheragesh. And it had snow from October to June, this tiny town. And there was a gulag, a prison and a mine there. And the mayor of this town had got these BBC journalists who'd been staying in private accommodation. And this giant freestyle wrestling champion who'd been an absolute behemoth out on the street, he said something like, foot to him. And this kid looked like he was about to get disemboweled. Looked like the mayor was going to murder him. He just cowered in the corner. So I went back to the idiot. I used the idiot strategy and just sat in front of him grinning like. And he sat there for an hour and a half flicking his letter opening knife, trying to intimidate us. And I just sat there with this grin painted on my face like. And eventually he cracked a big smile and he was like, you stay in my town. And I was like, yes, let's. And we filmed with this guy for about 2 hours to stroke his ego. But it was ridiculous. One of those situations, horrific at the time, really scary. But it's the first thing that comes to my mind when I think of, like, and it's the story I love telling most. You're like, yeah. And it doesn't, because there's distance between it now. That was, nearly 15 years ago. And it just feels like one of those weird stories that you tell, but it barely feels real anymore.
It seems that there's like a sense of kind of rocky up to a ski. It's that sense of adventure and maybe a bit of naivety, but it's like, I just want to, in your case, I want to show snowboarding and I'm going to go and do that and find out on the way what's going to happen. Do you know what I mean? Rather than like planning everything. And it's like, I'm just going to put my trust in snowboarding and a sense of adventure and it's all going to work out.
But that's the best form of travel, isn't it? I mean, I get the appeal of going on a package deal, but we never travelled like that as kids. We never did the package deal. So that kind of making it up as you go along, my dad would just load everything up on top of the car and we'd drive off somewhere, find campsites and find good places to go sailing or digging on beaches. And that was it. And I kind of carried that on. And I love now those experiences kind of help me learn to tell stories. And that's all commentary is, that's all presenting is. And we did the Junior World Champs recently and I had the best feeling. So I watched Korea in 2018, kind of getting to grips with snowboard culture. And they had they had these talented young riders who'd been trained, but the coaches had kind of watched Shaun White and Sage Kotzenberg and all the, like Jamie Anderson, and were like, okay, this is how you do it, and we're trying to work it out. At the Junior World Champs this year, this girl called Soo Young-hun turned up and she did a backside 7 melon like Peter Line used to do them or Noah Selasnik did them. Like melon, a really fucking hard trick on a snowboard, pointing your front leg like that, not turning it into a method with the back leg squeaking out. She pushed it right forwards. Then she did a cab 9 double underflip. That really, in women's snowboarding, one of those tricks that is very easy to cheat. You do kind of 90-degree spin, double back, 90-degree spin. Came in, rolled it off her heels and went through 2 proper corks. I was like, and it was there. It was like snowboard culture, snowboard history. She'd done all the work. Maybe it was completely natural. Maybe it was a fluke. The language barrier, we couldn't talk about it afterwards. But she had a giant grin on her face. She loved snowboarding and she was doing it beautifully. And it was like, oh, there it is. It's still alive and well. It's in such good hands. There's still kids who froth over this and obsess over the style and the way you do a trick and the way it feels. And because it's one of those things you do, and it's so, you can share it with all your mates, but you can do it personally when you lay into a turn or when you take off a jump. You know when it feels disgusting and inside your skin crawls and you feel like you're going to do a little puke in your mouth because you know it was horrible. And you're like, that was disgusting. I hope no one saw it. And then
You're
you
already
do
annoyed
something,
by the time you land because you know it was awful.
and you're like, "Bleh." But then for that moment that you do it and you take off and you float through the whole thing and your hand just finds the edge and you just drift out and there's that millisecond where it's all just perfect and you're like, oh my God, I did that. And I bet you can tell me, I can still tell you 3 or 4 times that happened. And I can remember them clear as, like my memory's like Swiss cheese, but I can remember those moments clear as day. And I still get them. It's definitely not as pretty or as big, but you still get them every now and again.
Yeah. So what, just to wrap this up then, I was going to ask, like, what does snowboarding mean to you now? But I'm sort of thinking of changing that to why, if someone's listening who hasn't been snowboarding for a while, whatever reason, or looks at it and just thinks, doesn't quite understand it, why should someone go snowboarding? Or go snowboarding again?
It's really hard. There's a way of looking at it. There's a lot of things you could accuse snowboarding of doing. It's like it's super hedonistic. It's really selfish. It's expensive. But of all the things we've just discussed, like the escape, it's a bit of like Sian, my wife, is a yogi. She's an instructor and she meditates. Like for me, snowboarding, like, and sometimes I live in a mountain town now, so I can go for 2 hours and that's all I need sometimes, but it's a meditation. I can't, when you get up there, there's people, I remember Neil McNabb talking about this, like he had a moment where he was in a total whiteout and he was just riding, feeling the mountain, and it was like, it's total escapism. You can go and find a place like just for you. And you can do it on your terms. You can do it with your family and friends. You can do it on your own. But for me, it's that pure escapism in the most exquisite environment. Like, why wouldn't you give yourself that? Like, I'm not saying it's everyone's jam, but if you've snowboarded, you know that feeling. And you're depriving yourself of something really, really valuable, something that's really, really good for you, if you don't go and give that to yourself every now and again. And I'm a really, really staunch believer that if you want, you can go and spend 50 grand. Like that's what some people spend on a ski holiday. But you can, if you know where to look, you can spend £1,000. You can go and do it for that. Like look at like Mia Brooks, the Brooks family, look at what they did seasons for. And like, it's cheap. Like, it's still available out there. You can go and find those deals. Yeah, you're not going to be going on February half term to find those deals, but sure, you can find them. It's out there.
Yeah.
And
it's worth it.
I think it's just about having that passion. And like sometimes you let it go. It's really easy. Like you've done it. I saw Tim and Gendel do it, like lose it for a bit. And they still had access to it. Like, but every time you go back, every time you're able to pull one of your mates back into it, if you're listening to this and you're still doing it, like grab someone and take them back out with you to see the look on their face again when they do it. And if you haven't done it for ages, go and find that impetus. Like it takes a bit of effort, but it is so worthwhile. I can't rate it highly enough.
That's amazing.
Getting married.
Let's
getting married to my wife.
Hi, Sian.
I don't know if she'd be quite as passionate about that. Apparently, men live 5 years longer if they get married. Women live 5 years less.
You believe
I could talk to you for fucking hours, man. Thank you so much.
Oh, absolute pleasure. That was so much
I really
fun.
appreciate it.
Oh,
I really appreciate it.
Good luck with it all. I'm stoked to have a listen. I think it's a brilliant project. Make sure in your intro you explain you got to do it with that. Like I did all the seasons. I worked out in the mountains, and no one's immune to it. Like you can lose it if it takes effort. It's like any relationship. You got to work at keeping it alive. And I did.
Yeah.
This is probably a better way of putting it. Like when I first started TV presenting, I got really blindsided by the fact that I wanted to be a TV presenter, and to me, the route for that was back in London trying to become, I was going to say Russell Brand then, probably shouldn't say that now, but in 2003, like Dermot O'Leary and what's her face, Big Brother lady, Davina McCall, those kind of presenters was where you were trying to head to. And I lost the mountains for 3 or 4 years. And it took me a while to realise, like, actually, I refer to this regularly, the wanker count outside action sports and specifically snowboarding is really high. And I came back to snowboarding because there are so few wankers there. And like, obviously it shortened my career, and then somehow I've ended up on Ski Sunday. But at the time, for 3 years there, 2003 to 2006, it was like, okay, there's not much work of what I think I'm good at and what I want to do here, but I know I want to be in snowboarding. Like, it was a conscious move back towards that. And I think that's it. It's really easy to forget. And the dust just starts to collect on your memories of snowboarding. And you have to physically go in there, dust them off, like blow all the dust off and say, no, we're getting this book out again. I'm going riding again.
So there you go. If that doesn't leave you frothing for some riding, I don't know what will. Well, hopefully all the other episodes that are coming your way very soon should do the same. I want to send a big shout out to Ed for sparing the time, to the photographers and the people that were waiting on him to finish our conversation. As I said at the top, it was late for me here in the UK, and it was very early in the morning for him over in New Zealand. So, big ups to Ed and Sian for making the time for that conversation. And as I said in it, I could have talked to Ed for hours. There's so many things, actually, as we dug into it, so many sort of commonalities, especially from the early Val d'Isère days, that I could have talked about more about my story, I guess, but that'll come out over episodes over the coming months. And yeah, just Ed has got so many stories. I feel like we literally scratched the surface. He is a raconteur, and he enjoys life and finds interest in life, so has lots of interesting things to talk about. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed that. That really lit me up when we did this interview. It got me pretty hyped to go snowboarding. And the obvious other thing that gets me hyped to go snowboarding, and probably you as well, is a good shred movie. And every week I'm going to be recommending something to watch. Now, the keener-eared listener will have heard some music at the start of the show, and it is a track by Primus called Under the Electric Grapevine, which was the opening track from the 1996 movie Subject Hackinson. And that movie has got a special place in my heart, and probably many of the guests that we're going to have on, because for those of you that don't know, there was a riot at Sheffield Ski Village, and it was kind of that movie certainly helped agitate a couple of hundred drunk snowboarders. And I think the Sheffield riot might even deserve its own episode. It was certainly an event that put British snowboarding on the map, and whether that was a good thing or a bad thing, it's not really for me to say. I can only recall my own memories of it, and it was just eventful and pretty nuts. But let's not get into that now. But this movie, Subject Hackinson, was kind of one of the first movies that was solely concentrated on pretty much one rider, and that was Terry Hackinson. And this bit of music is certainly iconic to that as well. So Yeah, I'll put a link in the show notes of a link. I've said link twice now. Put a link in the show notes to Subject Hackinson where you can watch it for free. Kind of see what was actually, when that dropped, it was the cutting edge of snowboarding. And it rightly so did amp up a couple of hundred drunken snowboarders in Sheffield and probably many more around the world when they first saw it. So yeah, if you've got a shred film that you would recommend to the community, if you want to get in touch, you can send us an email at thankyou snowboarding at gmail.com. That'd be great. Obviously, I do have quite a knowledge of shred movies, but it might only be for a period of time, and you might know something outside of that that might be great that I might not know about. So if you want to get in touch and tell us about a film that particularly highlights snowboarding for you, that'd be great. And also, if you want to get in touch, we want to keep this part of the show open as well for you telling us about your experiences of snowboarding, whether it's how you got into it or what it's meant to your life or where it's taken you in the world. Basically, if you've got an interesting story that centers around snowboarding and you'd like to tell it to the community, that would be amazing. Again, it's thankyouSnowboarding at gmail.com. And the best one every week we'll read out. And that'd be amazing. So that's it for this time. Thank you for tuning in. These are going to be weekly over the winter season. And next week, we're going to have Melanie Leando, who was a rider that sort of burst onto the scene and did a lot of work for not only female competitive snowboarders out of the UK, but certainly just for snowboarders who wanted to take the competition side seriously. She paved a lot of groundwork with her and her good friend Leslie McKenna. So we're going to be talking to her a lot about that, and also just how she got into it and what it means to her now that her sort of competing career is over. So yeah, I hope you've enjoyed this. If you can, share it among your friends, post it up on all socials. If you're listening to on a platform that allows you to do a review, if you've enjoyed it, a positive review would be amazing. We're going to, as I said, we're going to have episodes coming out all throughout the winter. And also want to shout out to the TSA, the Snowboard Asylum, who have put themselves behind this project. It's totally in line with their part in the snowboarding industry and in the snowboarding community. They certainly also act as the glue that keeps a lot of events going and keep a lot of people connected through snowboarding. So big shout out to the Snowboard Asylum. If you are after any kit this winter, certainly go and check them out first. They've got decades and decades of experience under their belts, and they will certainly steer you in the right direction for kit. So yeah, that's it for now. Join us next week with Melanie, and yeah, thanks for listening. And until next week, we'll see you then. Take care. Peace.